Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of our podcast. So as usual, Sanjiva is joining me.
Nice to see everybody back.
So last episode we discussed about first principle thinking for architects and we got some really good feedback. So today we have a special guest, Daniel Bryant. We know Daniel for a long time. And Daniel is an author and then contributing a lot as an InfoQ editor. And I really like Daniel's mission statement, helping you build better platforms. But Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself since I was there at KubeCon and you had a really nice intro about yourself.
Thanks, Asanka. Yeah, and thanks, Sanjiva. Good to see you both. I started my career, 20 years ago, right, as a Java developer. So I was initially doing a lot of JVM work, kind of service-oriented architectures, that good stuff. And then throughout my career, I moved into doing Ruby on Rails and Go eventually and a bunch of other things. But along the way, did architect roles. I always loved following yourselves. Actually, the bigger picture, integrating all the things together. Always loved that. I did QA. I did ops. I did a bunch of platform roles. And then also kind of CTO type roles as well. And the joke I like to make is it's like Pokemon with my job titles. I'm trying to collect them all, right? But I just love, like yourselves, I love learning. And if I'm not learning, I'm not happy in some way. So I'm always doing a new challenge, particularly working at startups, as I often do. You're filling in the gaps as and when needed, right? Whatever your title is, you're often doing a different job. So I love doing that. Now I'm doing more sort of product marketing and DevRel type roles, helping folks talk about the products they're creating in platform space, but also critically bridging the gap between the users, which are the developers typically, right, or the platform folks, and the folks building the actual platforms and building the products. Because I'm a massive fan of helping people, like platform engineers, helping developers thrive. And to do that, we've got to understand what we need, we've got to deliver on that, and then we've got to iterate as fast as we can, right? So I just my background in software development and ops is really helping what I'm doing now around building platforms, building products for folks.
Great. Yeah. So I think to start, so we were discussing about platform a lot, Daniel, and in a couple of episodes, Sanjiva spoke about it. And I think you have a really nice definition about platform. And I really like the way you framed it based on your experience, the cognitive load you had as a developer. Probably we can start from there and then get into the details.
Yeah, sure thing, Asanka. That actually started, I think, 2.5 years ago at KubeCon EU, at KubeCon Valencia. And I put up a chart on the screen which I showed my 20-year dev career down one axis, and then sort of the technologies I'd used. And then I drew on the cognitive load, drawing of team topologies and all the good work by Abby Noda and Nicole Forsgren and all these amazing people. I recognized that as I'd gone through my 20-year career, sometimes I was really struggling just understanding all the tools, understanding how to knit things together, understanding how to deliver value, fast, safe, and at scale. And particularly early on in my Java career, when I was just building EAR files, monoliths, right? It was super simple. I was coding locally, testing locally, happy days, hand it off to ops, they run it, no props, right? And then we moved to sort of the more classic SOA, service-oriented architecture days. And then I was dealing with enterprise service buses, I was dealing with message queues, and suddenly my business logic was somewhat spread out. And my cognitive load went higher as I had to coordinate, the coupling and cohesion and all the kind of, knitting things together. And then it actually went simple. So the cognitive load reduced as I moved on to Ruby on Rails, and I was just deploying on Heroku, right? And then I moved on to Cloud Foundry using Spring, things like that. And the workflow was amazing. I had my build pack, I wrote some code, I did CF push, and we were using, I think, New Relic or other dashboards at the time. If stuff went wrong, I'd be able to see line 107, dive into that, right? Oh, I've put a semicolon in the wrong place, and I'd go and fix it, and it was happy days. And then that was great, but obviously we realized that didn't scale to a certain point. So then we moved on to microservices. I think we all know and love microservices here, but we also know and hate microservices, right? Because as the joke goes, every incident becomes a murder mystery. Suddenly, when something goes wrong in a distributed system, you've got kind of no idea potentially where it is. So my cognitive load went up massively. The teams I was working with, same deal, when we moved to microservices. yes, we got that initial burst of speed, all working on our individual services, not tripping over each other on the monolith. We could scale things individually. That was great too. Got a bit of resilience going on there with your blast radius. But then how do we deploy all this stuff? Oh, I need to learn Terraform. Oh, cool. Got Terraform. How do we scale this out? Oh, I need to learn AWS. Oh, right. Got AWS. How do I need to do all the tracing? Oh, I need to learn Jaeger or Zipkin. Oh, right. Cool. And again, amongst friends here, right? We love learning, and I was like kind of happy. I also appreciated my cognitive load was going up, but as I was consulting at the time with a company called Open Credo, like a kind of ThoughtWorks kind of type company, consultancy in London, many of the developers I was working with didn't want to do all the extra stuff. They were like, "Where's my CF push? Where's my build pack?" Right? Well, I just want to write. I want to get customer requirements. I want to write some code. I want to deliver some value, and I want to go home and spend time with my family. Right? I'm like, I totally get that. And they're like, "You're asking me to learn Terraform, and you're asking me to learn all this other stuff." And that's why, I drew that graph, because I quite enjoyed it, but I did see the trade-offs of asking developers to learn all these other things, and all they wanted to do was solve business problems. And I'm hoping now, this podcast is part of it, right? We're coming together with the platforms and with the tooling to make it a bit easier for folks again to ship code to deliver value to end users, because that's what we're all here for. There's always complexity. We want to, push it around as appropriately, provide good abstractions, and I'm hoping that platforms, kind of the next evolution of DevOps and all those good movements there, that it really gives us like a good kind of leverage points to deliver value and minimize that cognitive load as a developer, right?
Yeah, I actually have in some talks I've given, I show a photo of a Sun 350. I don't know, do you remember one of those? That was the machine I had when I was a grad student. And I draw a line from that to the internet and remind people we actually had a real IP address. My desktop machine was on the internet. It wasn't like, 17 layers of NAT behind the internet. It was on the internet. And the way you wrote some code and ran it was you wrote the code, you said make, and it would compile, and you run it, and it's running on your machine.
Yeah.
And at Purdue, where I did my graduate work, the servers at the time, this is before the Amazon line of treat your servers as cattle, not pets, came. All the Purdue servers at the time were named after King Arthur's Round Table Knights.
Oh, nice.
Arthur was the main one. Pendragon was the name server. I can't remember all the names anymore. And my PhD advisor was a Greek person, and so we had all the Greek gods as server names.
Nice. Yeah, classic.
So we've gone from that to where you wrote some code and you actually ran it, now to you write some code, it pulls in all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Eventually it becomes an image, you push it into some repository, gets deployed somewhere. Those somewheres are virtual machines sitting on some other somewhere, and all you know is you get a URL to it.
Yeah.
Right? So all the things underneath that are making life elastically scalable, able for us to do all these wonderful things we do today that we didn't do in the early 90s and the late 80s and so on, do come at a huge cost.
Yes.
And getting all that kind of out of the way, so the average developer who doesn't want to go learn all this stuff, I mean, for people who want to learn everything from soup to nuts, should absolutely learn every layer. It's very interesting. I find it interesting. I think we all find it interesting.
Yeah.
That's not the normal person for the most part.
Quite right, actually. Quite right.
So I think I think that really brings into this question of, so what is the platform? So I think maybe we can talk about that a little bit. So what is this thing, this mythical thing we're trying to create, which allows us to somehow not see stuff?
Yes, Sanjiva, it's a great question. I really like Evan Botcher's definition. So I put this on stage when I was at KubeCon, and I'm going to mangle it a little bit, because it's a sort of wordy definition, but it does encompass all the things. So I think the words are really important. But Evan focused a lot on this need of building a self-service internal product. So you're treating your platform as a product, and the goal of that product is to help delivery teams, stream-aligned teams, scrum teams, agile teams, feature teams, call them what you will, to deliver value at a high pace and with reduced coordination. That's kind of the salient points from Evan. Apology, Evan, I'm not doing your definition full justice. Definitely look it up. It's a really good definition. Another thing that Evan draws on is he talks about it's a socio-technical system. It's people, it's technologies. I really like that, right? Because early on in my career, I definitely focused on the technology, not so much the people. And as I've gotten a bit more mature, hopefully a bit more wise in the years, right? Wise in sort of experience, I realized the software and the hardware is somewhat the easy part of the equation. But really, it's the people bit that is hard, right? It's tricky to deal with. So Evan, in his definition, also pulls out and mentions of not only tooling and building a sort of substrate, which is the platform to enable this delivery of value, but he talks about knowledge and support. Super critical too, right? As you're building this platform, got to have the I talk about the APIs, the abstractions, and the automation, but you got to have the people side with it as well. Particularly like in an enterprise, which we're all used to dealing with, like stakeholder management, super important. Let alone first priority is focusing on your customers, on the developers, but you've got to have that stakeholder management too. So for me, that's the nutshell of the platform. It's an internal product to help everyone ship sort of at speed, with safety and scalability. You can argue in some ways it's a contract between developers and, say, infrastructure, operations, those kind of folks too. That's another way of looking at it. But for me, it's that nice kind of like boundary between the developers building stuff and the way you actually run it and operate it on a day-to-day level.
Yeah, I think that nicely fit into a paper that Sanjiva, myself, and our founding CTO wrote some time back called Platformless. So what we explained there also, Daniel, about platform, it should be self-service as well as it should have these capabilities like APIs and then other cloud-native middleware, and then the developer experience is the key. And you mentioned about the treating developer as a customer, right? So I think that's pretty important. And then the other aspect, I think about this, the collaboration in between these different teams, and then build something meaningful with a purpose rather than just come to some assumptions and build a platform that nobody will use it. And then people might go to shadow IT back if they are not happy with the platform.
Yeah, big plus one to that. And I saw that actually like 10 years ago when I was working at Open Credo again. We were doing a lot of what we now call platform rescues. Like we didn't necessarily call it platform at the time, Devops, enablement, all these things. But we were going into big organizations, particularly in the UK, and they were struggling with their platform rollout. And we have these meetings, all the execs and the C-level folks and then all the technical people. And we'd always ask, like, what are you building? And so many times back 10 years ago, it was, we're building an internal AWS, because like Amazon was the, thing, right? Sometimes you say internal Azure, internal GCP, and we go, that's interesting. That kind of, you've got some tin lying around, you want to put an API in it, that kind of makes sense. What do your developers need? And honestly, pick a number, like 9 times out of 10, right? People would go, we've not talked to our developers, like we're building a platform. And I'm like, great, I hear you, but like you're building a platform for what purpose? We're building a platform. And I'm like, what do your customers need, right? And then there'd be awkward looks around the room as everyone's like, we spun up this platform team, we've got a platform, we've copied the sort of competitor, and we've not actually delivered on what our internal stakeholders, our developers, what they actually need. And that in itself was a massive unlock for a lot of organizations, let alone then going and doing some debugging and figuring out, how to connect what they built to the actual dev teams. But it was so surprising. We could almost go from one meeting to a next and just see the same thing. I'm building a platform. I've assembled a platform team, a DevOps team, call it what you will, but I don't actually know what my goals are. I'm building a platform, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important point, because the developer, there are several levels of things that a developer needs in the enterprise. One is, of course, what an individual developer wants to get in terms of hiding abstractions, kind of better abstractions, hiding complexity, reducing the mental overload, and so on. But then in an enterprise, in an organizational context, you're not an individual contributor writing a bunch of stuff, living in a nice little siloed island. Right?
Yeah.
You live amongst many others with varying goals, varying objectives, varying skill sets. And of course, now in the modern enterprise architecture, we would talk about it as sort of an API-based composable business, to use a Gartner term, right?
Yeah.
So in that universe, the what developers need becomes something a lot more about an overall reusable software engineering platform. And I think, again, I can't remember that it's Gartner or McKinsey or one of these guys talks about it as establishing this sort of reusable software engineering practices within the company.
Yep.
Is an important component of how you become a digital business. And
Yeah.
then your customer's need very much becomes, okay, what is that set of things that I need to have, right? The software engineering need. So it kind of connects software engineering to platform engineering.
Agree, Sanjiva. Yeah, totally agree. And I think you make an interesting point there. And I talked about this a little bit at KubeCon about like enabling abstractions sort of up and down the stack, right? Because I think you're often thinking about sort of at the process level and at the compute level and at the sort of cluster level, but you've got the same analogies with the architecture, right? I'm thinking about my class, I'm thinking about my application, I'm thinking about my cell. Maybe we can talk about cell-based architectures. I know you've done some great work in that space. I've loved your papers on those things, and I'm seeing that emergence of that as well. And people, like, now they're shipping at scale, they want to have similar abstractions, similar ways of thinking sort of up and down the stack. So I think that's a really important thing to think about as well, right? In terms of like having those, like whether it's architecture or infrastructure, those kind of common abstractions that do hide enough of the sort of complexity that you can just get your job done, but not have too much magic. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in my talk, in that I've definitely worked with some abstractions where they were so magical, when something went a bit wrong or I wanted to do something a bit outside of the box to deliver that business value, I had no idea how I was going to do it, because like this abstraction was like a hard boundary. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's something to think about. It's really hard, don't get me wrong. I often talk about the Goldilocks abstractions. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, as the fable goes, right? And they are, I mean, that's what our jobs are a lot as architects, is to think about those abstractions, those trade-offs. But that stuff was really, really challenging, and still is.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to the developer and how a developer interacts with the platform, so one problem that I see, the platform builders, they are just looking at the portal and they are trying to give a portal to the developer. But developer, I think they need multiple entry points, right? So portal is one, and then they need a really good platform API exposed from the platform itself, and then CLI, because a lot of developers, they really like to work on the CLI and then get most of the things done. So I think that's where, like, it's not just a portal, and then you have this infrastructure orchestration layer, and then kind of the platform orchestration, and then you have this application layer on top of that. So combination of all these three plus the developer experience, giving it in a right way for the developer is pretty important when we are building the platform.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Asanka. And then it's sort of definitely in relation to like the software design principles there, because I mean, I'm biased because I'm working on Kratix, which is an open source tool, and the Syntasso folks is a platform orchestrator, and we focus on providing APIs and lifecycle management for platform components. But it just like emerged as I was looking at a bunch of platform architectures. To your point, we saw a lot of folks starting with portals and sort of baking the platform logic into the portal. And that almost reminded me back in the days when I was writing like JSP pages and I was shoehorning business logic in amongst HTML. Never felt right. Do you know what I mean? Because you're highly coupling your business logic to the presentation logic. And like I've done that. I made the mistake. My teams have done that. I learned the lessons pretty much. And it makes me a little bit nervous now when folks say, hey, not to speak ill of Backstage, because it's a fantastic bit of technology, it's super popular, that's why I sort of often use it as an example, but I chat to a lot of platform teams and they're like, oh, we love our portal, we can build a plugin for anything. And I'm like, you can, but should you? Like, where's the business logic of the platform going to sit? And I often say the brains really should be in the platform orchestration layer, and that is coordinating the infrastructure below. But the portal, like Victor Farsek says, your portal should be dumb, is the way he sort of phrases it, right? In terms of it's not got any business logic, any platform logic in it. It's just one way, as you said, Asanka, of interacting with the platform. And I'm a CLI person. I love the CLI, right? So but I'd like to have the same mental model as my colleague who's really UI driven, right? So why not? I'm using the CLI to interact with the platform orchestrator. My colleague's using the UI, Backstage, for example. Like that should work, right? But only if we design the platform sort of API first. And we're all massive fans of APIs here. I know we are, right? But like whether it's APIs for apps and APIs for platforms, same deal. API first is the way forward in my mind.
Yeah, so I think a really good analogy for what you just said, which is sort of an API first platform, is of course Kubernetes. The Kubernetes architecture is basically there's an API server that lets you talk to it with a set of abstractions, and it takes care of orchestrating everything underneath, and it lets you know when it can't do it. But fundamentally, it just says, you say, make it so, and it figures out how to make it so eventually. Right. So that abstraction, the set of abstractions in Kubernetes are perfectly designed for dealing with infrastructure orchestration across a set of nodes, which might be very large set, geographically dispersed, and so on. But then now platform engineering adds another set of abstractions.
Agreed.
So the conceptual architecture should be like Kubernetes, but you're uplifting the verbs, the atoms, the nouns that you use to communicate are no longer about pods and containers and deployments, but about maybe cells or APIs or environments or whatever the things that you want to have in your platform abstraction layer.
Yeah, perfectly said, Sanjiva. And that's exactly what we're doing with Kratix, actually. The founders deliberately built Kratix on top of Kubernetes because they knew they were going to be reinventing Kubernetes otherwise. The API server, as you said, fantastic. Declarative config, fantastic. Reconciliation loops, fantastic, right? And I really like the way you said about sort of just raising the abstraction layer. Like, we want all of that stuff, but slightly above the infrastructure level for most developers. Do you know what I mean? They want their sort of, like, to your point, they want often they want their specific components that are sort of related to pods and services and deployments, but it's more like related to what they're doing at a business level. So it's finding that balance between sort of Kubernetes APIs and the sort of business APIs of the platform, if you like. But I love the way you phrased it, and I'm a massive Kubernetes supporter. I have been since like early days, and like, as Kelsey Hightower, I'm sure we all know and love, right? It sort of says like Kubernetes, like the APIs are going to be around much longer than the actual Kubernetes implementation. What is the real win of Kubernetes, as you've said, is the APIs, the lifecycle management. We've seen GitOps, we've seen other things. Like, that stuff is just, it's gold, right? We need to make sure we do continually reinvent things on top of that with the learnings of that in mind.
Yeah, I think you made this point earlier too. Again, Backstage is a great product, but Backstage, in some sense, lets you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that's, that takes away an important responsibility of architects, of platform engineers, platform engineering architects, which is to make some amount of judgment calls.
Yeah,
I think
well
you made
said.
that comment earlier saying if the judgment call is too rigid, then you can't do what you need to do. If it is too loose, you are kind of, free for all. And you need to find that right balance. And that's where probably products will differentiate. And in fact, if you compare again with Kubernetes, there were others other than Kubernetes, which are solving similar problems. They've all kind of fallen off the wayside because their balance on their abstraction of flexibility and, opinionated behavior was not as right as Kubernetes. So that's, again, the art form in platform engineering. And how do you get the right balance so that the developers, the ops people who sit on top of the platform, get all the power they need, but no more.
Yeah, exactly. Well said, Sanjiva. Yeah, well said. I mean, I did a bunch of platform builds on Mesos back in the day, and there was a lot of power in that platform, right? With Marathon and with all the Spark jobs and all that kind of stuff. But there was a whole bunch of the community wasn't really forming around it. The contribution model was tricky, whereas the Google folks very quickly recognized, we need to donate this to the foundation. But I'm +1 to what you said in terms of the APIs and the reconciliation loops were Goldilocks. I like to say they were a perfect balance to get us started. I do think now we're all looking to build the next layer on top, as you said earlier, Sanjiva, we're looking to build the next layer of platform abstractions, but you've always got to build on firm foundations, and I think Kubernetes are our firm foundations.
So maybe Asanka, you can uplift it one more level, because you talk about this business service platform concept, which is kind of the software engineering platform that you're trying to build to represent the business. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit, because I think that
I think that. Yeah, so that's a really good point, Sanjiva, because now you have the technology platform, but then again, what you are going to do on top of the technology platform. So you are building various assets on top of that. So that's where the business service platform is coming, that the things that you do on top of the technology platform, that you create APIs, you write services, and then you might have different type of automation on top of it. So then it kind of create these business capabilities out of the technology platform that you built, and then enable people to discover them. And if you have discovery, then you can reuse it and have a way that how quickly you can build the end user applications. Now you are creating that reusable layer and enabling the application development teams so they can quickly build the end user applications and bring any new kind of business ideas that business teams are identifying, and then try to deliver it as soon as possible, because the main problem technical teams are facing, they are not delivering in the face of that business teams are looking at, and how quickly you can put that idea to the market, because whoever who comes first will have the better advantage, right? So I think that's where like we are framing this concept of a business service platform. And even there are many definitions like composable enterprise and like modular enterprise, the same thing but in a different form. So that's how we kind of bring it to the platform and telling enterprises this is the way you should consume and then build stuff on top of the platform.
I like it a lot, and something I see sort of successful is this notion of an internal marketplace emerging. Like Sanjiva, you mentioned like discoverability is really key, particularly at enterprise scale. Like I've gone into many places and seen like 10 different checkout services for an e-commerce thing, right? And really you only want one, but like people couldn't discover it, they built their own. That then leads to like diversity of implementation, which is hard to maintain, all these kind of good things. And I do think it's like where a lot of us are aiming for, Asanka, is that kind of being able to literally say, right, I'm building a new experiment here, I've got a hypothesis I want to test, plug in this, plug in that, plug in this, here's my testing, here's my observability, here's my security, ta-da, launch it, get feedback and iterate from that. I think we've seen it a little bit, even like Cloud Foundry had like service brokers and had services. I know you folks are working on a lot of similar things. I'm a massive fan of it. If we can get it right, it's getting folks to buy in to the vision. I think that's part of the architect's job quite often, is like sort of like you have to sell the vision, right? Of like, yes, there's a few guardrails here, but look at all the trade-offs you get if you stay in the marketplace. You know, look at all the sort of runtime support you get, the first line support you get, and most of us working in software, you know, we can see the writing on the wall with AI to some degree as well. Like we've always been composing things, but back from my Spring days, it was XML and some Java classes, right? Now we're just stepping up a level of abstraction. Exactly as you said, Asanka. We're now composing business modules, like whole sort of fully featured modules. And for me, I can deliver more value quicker. That's more fun, right? And you know, everyone wins if we're delivering more value to our end users. So I love the idea of like this sort of business service platform as the next layer up.
Yeah, and one thing that struck me when I was listening to you, that you said something about software engineering is a team sport. So I think that connects with this as well, because you need a common place to play, right? And with different roles. And then both Sanjiv and me are like, we are huge sports fans, and we play a game here and there as well. And we know the advantage of like how you can utilize a player and then win a game. So I think that's again coming back to that people aspect you explained. So getting this understanding about the business and how you build this stuff on top of the platform, and then facilitating the underneath technology to deliver what business exactly looking at is the most important thing, because end of the day you have to generate value, right? So that's kind of a mission everybody is going behind.
Yeah, as you were talking there, I was also thinking back. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Simon Wardley's work. So with Wardley Maps is a very popular way of like doing things. And I basically heard you saying the same thing there in terms of like you're always looking to innovate, leverage, commoditize is the general pattern. And that's kind of what you were just pitching with the service catalog, right? If you can put some stuff out there, it kind of works. We then commoditize it. People are building, like standing on the shoulders of giants every time, building new things. And that for me is great, right? I mean, I've followed Simon for years and I love his pitch and the general framing, but I can just see this. If we get it right with our platforms and with our business abstractions, like think of the speed we can go at. Like it's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I have been teaching software engineering in university for about 25 years. I think I've taught various times, and you know, modular reuse is kind of one of the holy grails of software engineering.
Agreed.
And we are pretty much at a point where we have all the fundamental technology we need to make that actually work at scale.
Yeah.
And that is why there is a possibility for this concept of a composable enterprise or API first enterprise or whatever the buzzword you want to use.
Yeah.
This kind of modularized capability, both available in the network or as source code modules through source sharing, all the packaging architectures we have. I think all the pieces are finally there for us so that we can actually make it so we don't rewrite the same code 7 times over.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, Sanjiva. Definitely.
So let's maybe switch gears a little bit. So obviously, all three of us are working in companies which are kind of building a platform engineering product or a platform product. So let's talk about the build versus buy challenge for a customer thinking about it, right? And so, people who are listening to this should remember we are all probably biased towards buy because we have a product to sell. So
totally.
With that caveat, but we are also, open-minded people, so we can talk about it cleanly. So let's. What do you think? I mean, what's the balance? At what point does it make sense to say, look, my organization is special enough. I can't buy a platform. I can buy pieces. I got to wire it together myself to meet my requirements versus, look, it's just writing code. Why do I have to be special? There's sort of this tug of war, right? So.
Yeah, and a bunch of folks actually asked me this at KubeCon and some other talks I've done recently, and I sort of picked a number, roughly what I've seen on sort of my experiences and even at my work at Syntasso now, is when you get to around sort of 50, 100 engineers, like you can no longer do the kind of DevOps thing, you build it, you run it. I love that. Werner Vogel, super smart character, bunch of other folks have kind of championed the same thing, and I was one of those DevOps engineers at one point, right? I was the Jenkins person, like all my Java builds were going for Jenkins, and I looked after Jenkins, and I graduated doing Opsy stuff, and that was my journey. But I think you build it, you run it doesn't work at enterprise scale. As we already said, if you've got 7 ways of doing observability and 20 ways of doing security, where you auditors, if you're a regulated environment, that's not going to fly. They're going to be like, hey, I've got to audit all 20 of these things or 7 of these things. There's a combinatorial explosion or nightmare kind of thing. So I've generally seen, and it does depend on cultures, on technologies, on people. Sort of pick a number between 50 and 100. Then you have some form of platform capability emerging, some infrastructure capability. And that's where I think then you need to be investing in, properly cultivating a platform for the needs of the business. I think that's what I'd see. It does massively depend, right? And you got to be sort of getting a pulse of your developers. I'm a big fan of using surveys, at a certain scale of understanding, are people being able sort of quantitatively and qualitatively, are they shipping stuff at speed, and what's their subjective experience of the platform? And that also feeds into when's it time to build a platform, Yeah,
I think the thing is we had to look at it from the enterprise point of view as well, because to build a platform, you need skills, you need time, and then obviously money as well, whether you can afford to do that. That's one. And then there's another problem with the platform architecture itself. You can't just have the infrastructure architecture specialists to do this. You need application architecture skills as well. And it's a combination of these different type of skills that you need to put together to build a platform. And then the time, because it takes a lot of time to build a platform. And if you are building it for years, like we had some experience building platforms for 3-4 years with larger teams. By the end of the exercise, is it going to deliver what the business is looking for, as well as can you invest that much of engineering effort to do that is the main question. So there are a number of trade-offs. We are not telling it's the wrong path. If you can afford it and you know how to do it, go do it. Because if you go to even CNCF landscape, you can find enough tools or ingredients to build a platform, but putting it together and then delivering it the way the developers want as well as the organization required, that's the challenge I think that we see in the industry.
And you have to know if you... Sorry.
I was going to say, like, you have to know if you're buying a platform wholesale, because you can buy sort of platforms wholesale, you are buying a set of opinions then, right? You're buying a set of guardrails, and if they don't match your organization, that's going to be a very painful journey, right? We all know that.
Yeah, but again, it's finding that balance, right, between where do you want an opinion, where do you want
Yes.
flexibility, right? And the challenge is, it's one challenge is of course what we just discussed, which is that it takes time, it takes skill, it takes money to build this platform. But then this is a marriage. Once you build the platform,
Good
you
point.
can't divorce, right? You're
Yeah.
there. This is a
Yeah.
lifetime game, so you got to work on version 2, and then you get random things like ELK is a good example, right? That had a license change suddenly.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
had to go to open search. Then ELK comes back again, says no, we were just kidding. So there's all this.
Yeah.
The underlying foundations on you build your platform is not stable forever, right?
Great.
When Terraform went whatever when
Got to change the license, BSL.
went to BSL, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
OpenTofu came around.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of moving parts that you are committing to staying on top of, essentially. And again,
Yeah.
that skill set and ability to maintain a skill set is really often underestimated, because it is not that, okay, I've got the greatest platform engineering, brilliant guy in my team right now. But then you got to remember what happens when he or she leaves,
Yeah. Quite
and
right.
what happens in 2 years and 5 years. And, this is your story, right? So you don't get to walk away. This is your
Yeah.
underlying foundation. So,
We talk a lot about blend, like so it's the build versus buy versus blend at Syntasso. In that
yeah,
once you get you need 50, 100 developers, you need like a platform function, right? And then you what am I actually going to build? What am I going to buy? And I think we've all said it as we're going through this discussion. But if you get the abstractions right, you can swap out the composable parts. Like hey, this is CI/CD, but it's Jenkins today. It could be Circle tomorrow. It could be something else, right? But getting those APIs as abstractions right allows you that optionality. Again, we talk a lot about optionality, sort of the finance background, a lot about optionality at Syntasso as well. And if you can get those sort of seams, those boundaries, the APIs, abstractions correct, it does, as things grow and change, to your point, Sanjiva, you can swap out as necessary. And that's why I think the kind of build versus buy is somewhat a false dichotomy. It's always blend at a certain scale.
yeah,
Like once you get past that 50 or 100, it's pretty much going to be blend, right? Because you're going to buy some stuff to save you some time. And to your point, Asanka, you've got to have that sort of long-term vision. But I think, I'm going to write some more blog posts on this one actually, because it's come up quite a bit recently. But that build versus buy versus blend, I think, is a really interesting discussion.
yeah.
And
So,
one more thing, sorry, Sanjay. So
go
that
ahead.
we identified inside the enterprise, there's a political battle as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Now you have a platform engineering team, and they are building the platform, and they are telling, okay, we are not responsible to run it. And then they are telling, okay, we are not responsible to connect the developer stuff. So basically, I think we saw this at last KubeCon in 2023. It was about platform engineering doing everything. But this year, I saw it's kind of slightly changing. Now you have Devops, platform engineering, SRE. There's the intersection in between these three, plus application architecture kind of blend into the mix. So I think that's a good thing happening in the industry. But if you are just take that approach of having these silos, I don't think it will work, because end of the day, you have to deliver software for the end users, right? Not just building a platform.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to get both of your opinions on this actually. So I talked with my manager, my boss, Colin Humphreys, who's like ex Cloud Foundry, Pivotal, did a lot of great engineering work there. And just before I left for KubeCon, we were shooting the breeze and sort of like talking about golden paths or paved paths. And he was like, hey, well, Kratix, we're not building golden paths, we're building golden bricks. Like, we can enable you, if you get the abstraction right, you can build your own path, like CI for this, runtime for this, and that's quite a challenge for some folks, because then the app developers have to take a bit more responsibility for what do they want to compose in their platform. I'd love to get both your takes on, should we be providing golden paths, as in the Cloud Foundry kind of model, right? Or should we be providing the golden bricks, which I think is more what we're talking about around the composability. But then how do app developers get the skills required to think about the platform?
So let me use. I have a couple of analogies I use to kind of explain the value of this end-to-end story versus having complete control of all the pieces. So one is Salesforce versus Siebel. So
Interesting.
you're old enough, you know, when pre-Salesforce, CRM was a consulting project like ERP still is.
Yeah.
Takes 2-3 years. You bring consultants, you get everybody together saying, well, what does one of our customers look like? What is the kind of life cycle they have? What's our sales methodology? What's our engagement methodology? All of this stuff, right? And 2-3 years later, you have a customized CRM platform that does CRM the way you want, or the way you thought that you wanted to have. And Salesforce comes along and says, well, CRM is just CRM. It's the same thing. Here are golden paths, golden bricks, whatever the layering, but here are highly opinionated frameworks for what a customer is, what an account is, what an opportunity is, what a pipeline is, what a report is. And you have a lot of variables you can tweak. You can say, well, in my case, I want to have this attribute and I want to, have that as being a primary key in my report, etc., etc. But overall, very, very opinionated out of the box, saying, hey, you can get world-class CRM for nothing. Just turn it on and you have CRM, right? And the difference is, of course, in one case, you are very much, hey, I'm in full control. I'm the guy. I know how my customers want to work with me. Let me decide what that flow is like. In the other case, it's like, well, it's a customer. I'm a service provider. It's the same relationship whether I'm selling insurance or cars or bicycles or cookies, same problem. And you just kind of follow a methodology. So I think what Salesforce got right were the bricks that they had, or were the golden paths that they had selected. Right? Because Salesforce, I remember I used to work in IBM and Salesforce was kind of beginning to take off. I quit in 2005. So before that, everybody used to laugh at Salesforce, saying Salesforce will never sell to an IBM. And of course they sold to IBM eventually because Siebel, so you start off at a very smaller entry point. So I think platform engineering also, we have a bunch of customers that we talk to who are, who have like 10 to 50 developers who don't have full pipelines and automation and engineering methodology in the system because they don't have the capacity to get it to go, right? For them, this is an out of the box. You just sign up. You guys have thought about it. You tell me what the golden paths are, and I'll live with it, subject to some amount of variation. Right? It's a Salesforce approach, basically. So I think again, there are varying models you can use to think about this, but in the end, you do want people who spend all of their life focusing on this problem. Give you some of the insight and wisdom in the product. Instead of saying, hey, I've just made anything possible for you to do.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
Right. All right. We should probably summarize, Asanka, and kind of wrap up.
Yeah, I think it was a great conversation. I think we touched many points, right? Like we started with the platform, and then what are the capabilities you should have in a correct platform, and treating develop as your customer and then build a platform for them, and about the team synergies, and then how it should work inside the enterprise. And we spoke about the outcomes from the platform, the business service platform, the discoverability, reusability, all these type of aspects. And we spoke about APIs, obviously, 2 levels of APIs, right? One from the platform itself and the APIs that you built on top of the platform. And I think the interesting part was the platform engineering definition, as well as what's your approach, whether you should build or buy. So I think we covered a lot, but then again, we can chat about this like another hour or so. But it's a great conversation, and I assume the listeners learn something. Even I learn a lot. I think we can continue this discussion on different topics, because the one thing, this is a more kind of emerging technology area, right? Like it's changing a lot, new things are coming, and enterprises are understanding the reality as well. So probably we can take a look after a while at how things are getting matured and how enterprises are absorbing these concepts.
Fantastic. Sounds great.
Daniel, thank you very much. And I have to say, I think we only use the buzzword AI only once today.
Yeah, sorry, I stuck it in there.
Not bad. So, but I think there is an interesting follow-up. What does AI do to this domain? And I think that's something that is.
I agree. That's a podcast in itself, right? I get asked this quite a lot. I mean, everyone's thinking about this, particularly from an investor side. Everyone's like, "What's your AI play?" Right? But even customers. So yeah, we'd love to do that sometime. That would be great.
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting conversation to have as well.
Agreed.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you very much.
Good to meet you both. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Talk to you soon.